HanselMinutes.com. It's Hansel Minutes, a weekly discussion with web developer and technologist Scott Hanselman, hosted by Carl Franklin. This is Lawrence Ryan announcing show number 129, recorded live Thursday, September 11th, 2008. Support for Hansel Minutes is provided by Telerik RAD Controls, the most comprehensive suite of components for Windows Forms and ASP.NET web applications. Online at www.telerik.com. Support is also provided by .NET Developers Journal, the world's leading .NET developer magazine. Online at www.sys-con.com. In this episode, Scott talks with Microsoft MS-Ajax Program Manager Bertrand Le Roy.
Hi, this is Scott Hanselman, and this is another episode of Hansel Minutes, and we're sitting down today with Bertrand Le Roy. Bertrand Le Roy, as I like to call him. He's a program manager with Microsoft and all-around JavaScript expert. And we're going to be chatting a little bit about some more advanced JavaScript topics, but, I'm not a JavaScript expert, and I would like to understand a little bit more about how I should think about JavaScript. Last week, we had Scott Cade on talking about object-oriented JavaScript. We had a lot of good feedback from that discussion. Some people who were JavaScript kind of hardcore people felt that some of the things that Scott had shared were not really the way they like to think about it, and maybe that his understanding of the prototype model was a little bit confused. So I went and did a bunch of research on this, and I looked at people's websites like Douglas Crockford, and I found that JavaScript is a lot more complicated than I thought it was, Bertrand. I think I'm writing pretty procedural JavaScript, and it turns out it's a lot more object-oriented than I had given it credit for.
Yeah, well, you can do stuff in a number of ways. And what's interesting about JavaScript is that the concept count is really low, but there are really lots of things you can do with those concepts. And that gave rise to a number of styles of coding in JavaScript. And so some people like to stay very close to the prototype-oriented nature of JavaScript, and some people like to abstract things away and work with things like that look like regular .NET or Java classes. And you really see lots of both styles, and there are some people that feel very strongly that one approach is the one true way, and so it's quite interesting to look at.
Well, how important is it for me to understand this concept of prototyping? The people that I've spoken to and some of the interesting discussions that have happened on Twitter indicate that this is fundamentally JavaScript's power, but if you come into it looking at things from a class-oriented perspective and expecting to declare classes and then use them, that you will ultimately get confused. Other people say that everything is a method, everything is a hash table, and I should look at it that way. What's the right way to think about JavaScript?
I think no matter what, you should know at least about prototypes, and you should know about closures, and there is this number of concepts that you will need to know about anyway, even if you're using some kind of abstraction that gives you classes, actual classes, and inheritance and stuff like that. I think it's still important to know what's going on. It's always the problem of so-called leaky abstractions. My personal position being that there is no such thing as a non-leaky abstraction. You're going to be confronted with the real nature of JavaScript, and the real nature of JavaScript is prototypes and closures and all that stuff. So yeah, I think it's this minimum number of concepts that you need to learn anyway.
So how do you explain prototypes to people who are getting started? How do you explain that concept?
In class-based languages, there is the notion of a class and there is the notion of a constructor. In JavaScript, what's a little confusing is that the class and the constructor are actually the same entity. So when you do new foo, for example, foo is both the class and the constructor, and what happens is that the foo function gets executed and an object gets returned from that, and that's your instance. But here in JavaScript, the prototype and the class are actually the same thing. And here I'm using the term class, which may be irritating to some JavaScript purists, but anyway. And when you new up an instance of a class, or when you new up a constructor, that the resulting object will have a prototype, and that prototype is what's common to all the instances of this object. And so one way to look at it is that when you use a member of an object, what JavaScript is going to do is it's going to look up this member, and it's going to look in a number of places. It's going to look first at the object itself for expandos in a way that have been set on this object. And if it doesn't find it there, it will go up a hierarchy. And the prototype is part of that hierarchy. And you can have a whole hierarchy of prototypes. And that looks a little bit like base classes, but it's a slightly different concept. And this is why there are so many libraries that introduce actual classes and inheritance using underlying prototype, like we do actually. But it's really all about looking up members and going up a hierarchy of prototype inheritance and stuff like that. I hope I'm being clear.
No, that makes a lot of sense. So it brings up another of questions, though. So, you said that really any library that you put on top of this is ultimately going to be a leaky abstraction. I assume including, MS-Ajax, which a lot of people feel is a library that makes JavaScript, look and smell more like C#, with interfaces and iDisposable and inventing and things like that.
Yep.
But ultimately, it's going to leak as well. At some point, you're going to want to understand that that's a construct of the library and not really a construct of JavaScript.
Yes.
Okay, so it sounds like it's important to know about that.
The way you write a class in MS-Ajax makes the prototype very obvious, actually. You first define your constructor, and then you define the prototype, and you really write prototype. It's not like you've got some other libraries. I think Moo is doing that, where or even prototype, where you have a class method somewhere, and you give it an object that describes your class, but the prototype is actually not apparent at all in that. In MS-Ajax, it's still very apparent.
Okay, so you're saying MS-Ajax is not as it doesn't try as hard when it comes to hiding as other libraries do.
No, I think we tried to give it a .NET feel, because our user base is used to .NET, so we wanted to make the transition as easy as possible. But we really didn't want to make .NET on top of JavaScript. That wasn't the idea. We really wanted to use JavaScript for its strengths. I don't know if we've succeeded at that, but that's what we tried to do.
Now, as a Microsoft employee and one that's focused on Ajax, of course, the Ajax world is very, very wide, and a lot of it is open source. How much do you work with other libraries and see how, Microsoft stuff works along with jQuery or works along with EXTJS or MochiKit or whatever? I mean, there's a pile out there, and, certainly the long tail happens pretty quickly, but there's 4 or 5 libraries that are really, really popular. How much do you spend looking at those things?
Yeah, so that's a really interesting question. All of those libraries focus mainly on the client side, right? So they're really JavaScript libraries, and most of them don't really have a server counterpart, which makes Microsoft Ajax a little particular in this sense. There are, of course, other libraries that do include a server-side part, but if you look at the major ones, like jQuery, Prototype, Moo, etc., X, they're really all about the client side. And the thing is, what we care about at Microsoft here, in terms of, what our bottom line is, what we want is ASP.NET adoption. That's what we're really after, right? So for us, we don't see all these other libraries as it's not competition in the same sense that Java Server Pages are competition for ASP.NET, because you can still use those libraries with ASP.NET. And if, as a developer, you prefer jQuery, we're absolutely fine with that. And actually, jQuery is an interesting example because it's very, it's a good complement to actually MS-Ajax, because it's doing stuff that we are not doing currently. and it's doing it really well. That's an example of a library that really focuses on one problem, solves it really well, and that's something that personally I appreciate a lot. And I've been using jQuery in personal projects as a complement to MS-Ajax to do CSS selectors and stuff. So yeah.
How reasonable do you think it is for people to use, MS-Ajax as a standalone library without any Microsoft server on the back end? I went and, you and I moved MS-Ajax into Aptana, so that people who use Aptana, which is an open source Eclipse-based IDE, if they want to use MS-Ajax client library, which is, it's just JavaScript, they can totally do that. Is it just the string builder that they would want, or are there other things that someone would want to use in MS-Ajax that aren't complements to ASP.NET?
So I think there is a number of strong points about our library, and one of them is globalization, for example. I think our support for globalization, string formatting, date formatting, all that stuff is really outstanding and doesn't have a lot of equivalents out there. So there is a number of things like that in .NET, for example, you're taking for granted, but that really in JavaScript is not trivial at all. For example, if you want to format a calendar in a Japanese culture, for example, or any culture for that matter, that's not something that's really trivial in JavaScript, and that's something we're providing out of the box with the library. So, it's a lot of those little services that you take for granted in managed code, but that is not trivial in JavaScript. But if you look at the main library, there are no controls in there, for example. So that it's really a base layer for constructing higher level constructs like components and controls and behaviors. So if you're looking for more high-level components, you should look at the Ajax Control Toolkit or third-party libraries.
Now, when it comes to also Microsoft-specific stuff, like, for example, I've seen a number of people online doing performance testing with, something as basic as, string builders, whether it be the MS-Ajax string builder or, the Dojo string builder, and they'll go and say, well, I think one article I saw that Scott Kuhn sent me was performance in Internet Explorer. So the guy went and looked at IE6, he looked at IE7, and he wanted to figure out is array.join the best way to bring strings together and things like that. When now IE8 is out, and I haven't done any of the performance tests and things like that, but how much attention do you have to spend in the MS-Ajax client library to browsers that are either getting faster or changing the way that they do garbage collection or things like that to make sure that the string builder still works well?
So it's funny that you're taking the string builder example, because that's really that's a class that personally I if it had only depended on me, I may not have included that class, because as you mentioned, array joining is the most efficient way to do that currently. Well, actually, this is evolving, and string concatenation becomes pretty fast too. So string builder actually tends to be somewhat slower than those native ways of concatenating and constructing strings. So string builder doesn't have the same usefulness as it has in the managed world. In managed code, basically, if you're going to concatenate not predefined number of strings, you should use a string builder, because this is what's going to be the fastest most of the time, right? In JavaScript, that's actually not true. The string builder will usually not give you a performance advantage. What it will give you is some convenient APIs that make the building the string easier. Like, for example, if you do an array join, and in your array you have undefined or null elements, you'll get undefined string in your output, which is not necessarily what you wanted. What you wanted was an empty string, for example. The string builder is going to do that kind of stuff for you. So the use is a little different.
It helps with your expectations. It may not necessarily be about performance, but more about giving you back results that you expect that may not be obvious if you were doing it manually.
and that's also one interesting point that is something that's specific to Microsoft Ajax, which is that when we have an equivalent .NET API, we've tried to achieve consistency with the .NET behavior as much as possible. And that's something you'll see on string formatting, for example. If you have a string.format in .NET and you do the same in JavaScript, you'll get the same results. So there is this goal for consistency. I think I've completely lost track of your original question here.
Well, I mean, ultimately my question was, how much attention do you have to pay to things that you've done in the past when new browsers come out and change things? The garbage collector is a lot different in IE8.
So the string builder example is interesting because now string concatenation tends to be somewhat faster than array join, which is interesting to see. But there are other areas like DOM manipulation, for example, that getting a lot of attention from browser vendors, which means that today, in one of our new features, for example, like template rendering on the client, when you do template rendering, many template engines out there are actually doing string concatenation because that used to be the fastest way of doing that. But there are a number of disadvantages in doing string concatenations like that. Like, for example, you have to encode some strings for the same reasons that when you build a SQL sequence of instructions using string concatenation, you would have to encode everything you're injecting into the SQL code. Otherwise, you'll get injection attacks, right? So what people are doing today is that they're constructing their SQL using parameters, right?
Right.
But today, when you do templating on the client, most engines actually do string concatenation, which is something that you wouldn't do with SQL. So what I'm getting at is that here, that's a point where browser vendors are making DOM manipulation much faster, and now it becomes almost as fast to construct your template rendering by actually calling DOM APIs than it is by doing inner HTML like those engines are doing. So that's something we've looked at when we constructed that feature. We had a number of design goals that we had, and one of them was performance. And when we looked at should we do string concatenations or should we do DOM manipulation using directly the DOM APIs, we found out that the gap between the two was actually reducing as the browsers evolved. So we decided to take the bet and do DOM manipulation, which is a much richer way of doing things. That gives us a lot of additional features that we would never have or we wouldn't have as easily with string concatenation. So that's one case where the browser evolution is really helping us building better features.
Yeah, that's actually the whole DOM manipulation and live binding and live templating thing we should come back to in a little more detail. But I want to just veer off for 1 second because you brought up an interesting point that we've got Chrome and we've got V8 and TraceMonkey, and there's all these things happening on in JavaScript, jitting, nano jitting, making it faster. And it's interesting to me that they're talking about getting JavaScript up to almost the speed of C. But we're seeing micro performance numbers, and they're showing things like, here's JavaScript that's 1,000 times faster if it's recursing. There's a big argument right now going on between V8 and TraceMonkey about this is the fastest benchmark, but it's only a very obscure edge case, and it has to do with tail recursion. I'm wondering, real work in JavaScript happens when you manipulate the DOM, I would think, more than it's, deep computational. We're not doing protein folding work in JavaScript. Doesn't the browser's implementation of the DOM affect speed? Yeah,
that's an excellent point. And when I saw the benchmarks that were first published about Chrome, I thought, what are they thinking? Who is going to do, who needs to do ray tracing in JavaScript? That doesn't make any sense today, at least. Maybe the Google people are actually looking farther away than I am, but currently the bottleneck for me is DOM manipulation. That is the number one bottleneck. And I'm guessing that it's the same for all application developers. So that's what we need to get really fast. And the good news is that Chrome is doing a good job at that too. And, we are not Internet Explorer cheerleaders in this team. We are Internet Explorer users. So we may have a closer connection with the Internet Explorer team, but we are very happy to see JavaScript getting faster on other browsers, because we know that this is going to lead the IE team to actually follow up with action and get their own JavaScript engine faster. So we think this is really going in the good direction, and Ajax has been a fantastic catalyst in that evolution.
Yeah, I mean, ultimately, I was actually recently misquoted in a panel we talked about when I said that it's good that all of this is happening, and I said in the quote that JavaScript getting faster is going to kind of kick us all in the butt and move forward. In the article that was written, they thought I was talking about kicking Microsoft in the butt, but really just JavaScript getting faster is a good thing for everyone. Every browser should have fast JavaScript. Every developer should not have to worry so much about JavaScript slowing their system down. Which makes me wonder, like, how soon till we get really truly multi-threaded JavaScript, where we can't bring a browser down from, lock an entire page up from badly written JavaScript.
I'm not sure what the question is.
There's been some interesting tests that have been done where people can do something like, while true, and then do a string append and lock up IE completely because of poorly written JavaScript. I mean, we've all seen times when we'd hit a browser page and we'd say a script on this page is running slowly. So what Chrome and IE8 are doing in terms of isolation is interesting, but ultimately you wouldn't even the page to crash, even if it has bad script like that. And actually, there is some interesting research going on at Microsoft about that, and that should be made public in the next few months. And that's a fascinating subject, and there is a lot to be done there. And I think what's going to happen is that people are going to find solutions for this that don't necessarily imply core work in the browsers, but they're going to prove of concept that will solve those problems, and eventually those will be integrated into the browsers. And that's exactly what happened with Ajax, and this trend is continuing, and it's great to see, because the whole community is really evolving the web at once, and that's great. Do you know how to make the possible out of the impossible? Well, the .NET Ninjas at Telerik do. They just released a huge pack of web controls all built on top of ASP.NET Ajax that'll help you build impossibly fast and interactive applications in no time at all. They've made the impossible possible in desktop development. If you think you can't have a carousel component in WinForms, well, you can. Their Windows Forms suite features a super powerful grid view control and 32 other crazy desktop components that'll give you dazzling WPF-like features, but in WinForms. They do the same thing in reporting solutions with a new design surface like nothing else. Looks just like graph paper. Gives you advanced page layout capabilities. Makes it feel more like a graphic design software than a reporting solution. Go check them out at telerik.com and be a .NET Ninja. And thanks for listening. Well, where do you think JavaScript's going to go? What's next? What are some things that you'd like to see implemented to make Ajax easier? In JavaScript, what is it, 1.6++? What do you want implemented to better enable Ajax scenarios?
Short term, I'm pretty happy with how things are evolving. I mean, having native JSON serialization and deserialization, that's great. That's something that's really going to help with the performance of Ajax applications and also the security. We also have some needs of cross-domain, and cross-domain communication is also something that we are getting with the new browsers. And the HTML5 specification actually does a number of things that are interesting for Ajax. And what's interesting here is that if you look at the ECMAScript specifications, there is actually very little about DOM interaction that kind of stuff. And this is something that's been taken over by the work group when they did HTML5. And one thing I'd like from the ECMAScript community would be to have more explicit work being done with DOM interaction from within the ECMAScript stack, because let's face it, JavaScript is becoming a very, very important language, but it's still mainly used when interacting with a document object model. So this should be baked into the specification, in my opinion. That would clear a number of ambiguities that can be a problem today. So longer term, I'm really interested in seeing how things evolve in the ECMAScript committees, and the recent Harmony thing has been very interesting to look at, because finally things are going to move. So that's kind of cool.
It's interesting how quickly it's happened. We're in a new browser war suddenly, and it's all JavaScript based.
Yeah. Seeing the general specification coming back from this huge, wild, strange language that was the proposed ECMAScript 4 back to something a little more pragmatic, and I think pragmatic is the key word here. That was good to see. And what's also good to see is that this is not going to be stopping innovation in the language. So.
Yeah, I've been using JavaScript. I used it when it was LiveScript, back in the day, and I was doing this actually while working at Nike and working on a Java applet actually. And now it seems like JavaScript has got the power of Java. It's going to come full circle, and now if they're going to start nano-jitting things and getting, we've got the DLR running JScript in the CLR and the DLR. Is this going to kill Java and Flash and Silverlight?
Well, I'm not a big believer in something killer, for example, iPod killer.
So you don't like to put killer after anything? Let me rephrase it. Do you think that JavaScript can get so sophisticated that it could become powerful enough to really use for those really complicated interactions that people use Silverlight for now?
Well, actually, I would love that.
Well, you're the JavaScript PM, so you'd be really excited about that.
Personally, I would love it, but somehow it's taking kind of that direction. All the vector graphics in the browser is getting there. It's still lacking in Internet Explorer, but
whenever I do a site that has even something as basic as like a little Flash podcast player, or like we're doing Baby Smash in Silverlight right now, there's always an interaction with JavaScript. It seems like JavaScript is the glue that fits everything together. I couldn't see writing. Yeah. Sometimes you'll see people go and write something in JavaScript, and it'll make you go, "Wow, that guy just wrote Solitaire entirely in JavaScript," or he wrote, someone wrote Lemmings, the video game Lemmings, in JavaScript.
Yeah, there is also a Mario implementation.
It's impossible to read and maintain. I don't know. I personally, I don't see it. I don't see any killing going on, frankly. But I think JavaScript getting faster is better for everyone.
So I think there is room for more than one tool. That's why I don't like the killing. I think really there are different cultures and different ways of looking at things. And every time I see someone claiming that something is the one true way of doing something, I really don't like to hear that kind of stuff. That doesn't make any sense to me. And there will always be people who prefer to develop in managed code. There will always be people who prefer to develop in a dynamic language or a static language, or you name it. And what's interesting is that it's when a technology becomes mature enough that you can do pretty much what you want with it. And when I say that I would love to see JavaScript get to the point where it can do everything that Flash is doing, that's what I mean by that. If JavaScript is your tool of choice, and then you should be able to do whatever you want. And if Silverlight is your tool of choice, you should be able to do whatever you like.
Right, exactly. So the water level is raised such that kind of all boats float.
Yeah, that's my ideal world. You choose the tool that you prefer.
Yeah.
And what I wouldn't like on the other hand would be for JavaScript to be a killer for all those products and become the one true way of doing things.
Right. Because then at some point there'd be no way to do something in JavaScript. You wouldn't be able to maybe talk to the webcam, or we'd have to wait for the HTML version 7 that comes out with the webcam tag. People are saying that the video tag is somehow going to change, Flash, and then YouTube is going to start switching over to the video tag and things like that. Like a new HTML tag is going to be the solution to all of our problems on the web.
Yeah, well, all that stuff. There is no end to innovation, right? So it's just raising the bar, and people will find something else beyond video that is the new killer app, and it goes on like this, and that's how the industry evolves, and that's great. I mean, that's how it works.
Speaking of innovation, though, let's talk about the templating engine that people can go look at codeplex.com/ASP.NET. This is what are you calling this now? What's kind of the code name? Is live templating, or what are we calling the client templates?
I'm not sure we have a good name for it.
Okay, well, what is it that it is here? And then we'll point people towards your blog and up and towards Codeplex. What does this accomplish? Because it's JavaScript.
What you download from Codeplex is ASP.NET Ajax 4.0 preview. So it's a preview of the next version of ASP.NET Ajax. And this includes several things and several key components. And I'm hoping that these key components are very much painting a complete picture of the scenario that is developing a client-side data-driven application. So today, if you want to develop a data-driven application, you can do it on the server, you can do it with update panels, or you can do it purely on the client. So there is this kind of evolution from everything on the server to everything on the client. And the scenario we are addressing here in 4.0 is everything on the client. So what we are giving you is an easier way to query, for example, ADO.NET data services, which are REST services on .NET. So you get that data to the client, and then from that data, you format it into HTML. You have some interaction going on in the client, and then you get that data back to the server. So that's the end-to-end scenario. And templating is a key part of this because that's the part that takes your data and builds some interactive UI from it.
Okay, exactly. I was at TechEd Australia and New Zealand just last week, and I used some JavaScript and the Astoria, now ADO.NET Data Services, JavaScript API to pull information over and put it into an unordered list, but I ended up just using string concatenation. So I should have I would have been able to use this and would have been a simpler way to do it. Yeah,
so there are actually two main ways you can construct UI from data on the client. You can do string concatenation like you did, but this has a number of issues I was saying earlier, like preventing from injection.
I didn't do any encoding.
Yeah, exactly. But this is usually fairly fast. I mean, it's even the fastest approach that you can use. Or you can use the DOM APIs. And if you use the DOM APIs, it's another kind of nightmare because your code becomes very unreadable and very unmaintainable. And this is if you don't use an abstraction layer. And the right abstraction here is to use a template. So a template is just, this has been here forever. We've been using templating engines for forever, but on the client, they're still relatively new. And so what the template engine is doing is that it's hiding the way it's actually constructing the HTML. And what it's presenting you as the abstraction is HTML with placeholders where the data is going to go. Well, it goes a little farther than that, but that's the minimum way of describing it.
Okay, so in this case, I would have made my list, my unordered list, and I would say UL and LI, and then I would put a class, like a CSS class, on that element, and that would make it available to you to pull data into.
No, what you do is that you insert some kinds of special syntax placeholders. So we use double curly braces, and what's inside of the double curly braces will be evaluated. So let's say, for example, that you want an input that has the value that comes from the first name field in your data. What you would do is input type equals text, value equals curly brace, first name, and you close your curly brace.
Okay. And that is shipped to the client. There's no server-side work happening here. That magic curly brace value is shipped all the way to the client and lives in the browser for a moment before it gets bound.
Yes. So here everything happens on the client. And actually, when I do the demo for this feature, I like to use a plain HTML page, not an ASPX page, because it really shows that there is no server-side magic going on here, and everything is happening on the client. So the client actually receives the template with the double curly braces.
Mm-hmm. So how do you mark the parent element as that this is the beginning of a template? So there is a class that you can use, but it is mainly used to hide the markup from the initial rendering of the page, because when the page comes to the client, you don't want the template with the curly brace placeholders. You don't want that displayed, right? So you use a CSS class just to hide that from the user. Okay.
But you can omit the CSS class and the rendering will still work.
Okay, so I would mark the CSS class not to let you know about it, but rather to hide that while it's before it's rendered.
Yeah.
Now, how do I? Where's the implied looping happen?
So before I answer that, let me mention how other template engines are doing things, because that's kind of an important distinction here. What most of the other guys are doing is that they're actually putting the templates in a script tag or in a text area that's hidden too, or there are a number of different approaches. And we are actually not hiding the template code inside of a text area like that, or a string tag, or a script tag, because what they're doing is that actually when they get the template code, they get it as a string. We get it directly as a DOM, as a structured DOM. So we are using the browser's HTML parser to our benefit here.
Okay. So then you're piggybacking your semantics on what already is coming down. Yeah.
So one of the things we've done is make sure that the syntax that we come up with is compatible with XHTML, for example, because the code for the template itself can be XHTML compliant.
Well, yeah, so if I was going to use templating in the middle of an already XHTML compliant site, I would be very frustrated if the templating engine, didn't create very readable code. If I couldn't visualize what the template's going to generate, and certainly I'd be very frustrated if it didn't validate anymore.
Yeah, so there is a number of advantages to that. The first is that we get the HTML parsing for free from the browser. The second is that it validates. And the third one is that it's easier to design. You can actually open that page in an HTML designer like Dreamweaver or Visual Studio, and your designer is going to be able to edit that code like he's editing regular HTML.
Okay.
So it's not just a string that's stuck somewhere into the page, which is a lot more difficult to handle and manage.
Okay.
So now that I've explained that, we can maybe I can answer your actual question.
Well, I'm trying to understand how this gets bound up. So I go and get a parent element, presumably by ID, right?
Uh-huh.
And then I need to set the data to go and looking. Do you traverse the DOM looking for these special curly brace values? And am I able to go and grab any parent element and say this is a client-side template?
Yeah, we do. So that's actually quite interesting to look at. So when you use that template, no matter where you use it, we are shipping a control that's called data view that is going to instantiate the template for you. But other controls could take advantage of the same system. So what happens is that when we pass the template, we are actually compiling it, if you want, into a JavaScript function. And that's something that's quite powerful. So what happens is that we scan the DOM of this template, and we do this only once when you pass the template the first time. And we generate JavaScript code that would create the equivalent DOM. And that JavaScript code is using the regular standard DOM APIs. And where this becomes really powerful is that if you have a double curly brace expression, this expression is JavaScript. We didn't introduce a new expression language like actually some other template engines are doing. We are actually using JavaScript because we already have it. Why not use it? And if we go back to the way we parse the template and we generate DOM instructions from that, this really fits very well because setting the attribute of a tag with an expression, we're just doing set attribute, and we're just injecting that expression directly into the code.
So could I put a conditional inside of a curly brace?
You can put any JavaScript expression you want. It will work.
Even a call to jQuery?
Yeah, sure. Why not?
Okay. That's pretty powerful. Now, how do you handle, if I was going to do string concatenation inside of it, if I was going to take first name and last name and concatenate them, could I get into trouble in that concatenation issue that we talked about before? Or are you handling, encoding these things appropriately for us?
Yeah, so that's another benefit that we get for free. When you do set attribute, when you use the DOM APIs, in other words, the browser is going to do the encoding for you. When you set the value of an input tag, for example, you don't have to worry about encoding. You don't have to worry about an unclosed quote in there because the quote is just part of the string that you set. This is exactly equivalent to using parameters when you build SQL. This is exactly the same thing. It's safe by design.
Okay. So so all this templating is a clean HTML-focused abstraction on top of the DOM API that does the right thing already.
So there is a lot we get for free when doing that. That's one of the deciding factors that came into play when we considered different designs for the template feature. And we did consider quite a lot of them.
Now, how would I do conditionals to show a tag or not show a tag if I wanted to look at information in the data and then alternatively show something or not show something?
Yeah, so the way we do it is that you in addition to the double curly braces, which are expressions that get evaluated and injected into the template, you can also have code blocks. And this is absolutely arbitrary JavaScript. And here it's just like in classic ASP or PHP, you can have an if instruction surrounding markup, or you can have a for loop around markup, which means that if you want to do conditional rendering, you can put an if instruction around the markup that you want to conditionally show or hide, and that's how you do it.
And that's just done as a script block, or how is that if statement tunneled?
So the script block, when we parse the template, we just take that script block and we inject the code directly into the function that we're generating. again, we are just getting the benefit of JavaScript for free here.
But that script block is inside of a comment?
Oh, okay. So the actual syntax here for those code blocks is inside special comments. So it's inferior, bang, dash dash, and then we're using a star to distinguish that from regular HTML comments. So this was something that we heavily discussed. We tried to find many other. We tried to find even one alternate way of doing that, and unfortunately, comments were the most viable options here. So it's kind of a problem because comments are supposed to be optional, and you should be able to remove comments and get the same behavior.
Yeah, and someone might strip them out. I mean, they may have a minifier that strips them out.
Yeah, sure. And that's one of the problems that we decided to just live with, because all the other candidates for that just had their own issues that were more important than this issue. So here we're really hitting a fundamental problem, which is that we are trying to introduce new semantics into an already existing language, which is HTML.
Well, I suppose they could certainly do that kind of logic in post-processing. If they found that comment block distasteful, they could simply do the work later.
Yes, so that's an excellent point, and something that we should cover in quite some detail actually, which is that all that you can do here can also be done imperatively. So every time the template gets instantiated in data view, for example, there is an event that's called onItemCreated that you can handle, and from this event you get access to all the DOM that you have just created from the template, and you can modify this on the fly. So this is the clean way of doing things if you don't like the inline code blocks.
Very cool, very cool. Well, we're almost out of time here, so I have one last question. If someone's using the big 3.x library, the 3.x Microsoft Ajax library, and they're going to be moving to 4.0, is this going to be separate files that they can use? Can someone, if someone wants the 4.0 feature set, but they don't want a lot of the stuff that's inside of 3.x, what's that transition like? Is it a cafeteria plan where I can pick some features and not others, or is it a whole? Do you take the entire JavaScript that you're going to need?
Yeah, so that's a good question, because we are actually looking at giving you more choice into what you include and what you don't include. Today, Microsoft Ajax is it's not that big. It's something like 22 or 24K gzip. So it's not that big, but still, chances are there is some stuff in there that you're not going to use in your application. So we want to separate things into smaller bits so that you can pick and choose. And this also applies, of course, to the new stuff we're doing. So currently, if you include the new stuff, you include Microsoft Ajax template, and this contains the template engine. It contains the bindings. It contains the markup expressions. But all these fits together, right? We haven't talked about the bindings, but this is a pretty elaborate system that enables you to have live bindings, which go beyond the time that the template gets instantiated. So.
Well, it sounds like we go into a lot more detail if we had the time, but we'll send people up to your blog up at ASP.net, Tales from the Evil Empire, and we'll also point people to codeplex.com/ASP.net. And I'll be sure to put in all the links in the show notes, and then any links that you give me to get people information about how they can do this kind of work themselves. Bertrand, thank you so much for taking the time to chat with me today. I really appreciate it.
My pleasure. Thanks.
This has been another episode of Hansel Minutes, and we'll see you again next week.